Good evening. Good evening. This is Trudy. I am Trudy. Started off, and we are here with It's About Time. Thank you for joining me tonight, and we will be covering the book of Genesis, chapters 43 through 45. So, a very interesting story. We're getting to the climactical portion of this particular book, and it's where we've seen a life of transition happening to escalation, and now we're here for revelation. So it's an awful good story. Good evening, Sister Lynette. Thank you for joining me. And so, what we find here is as we start off, is that Jacob actually has given orders to get more food. So, as we know, when we piece the story back together, good evening, Sister Kathy, is that when Joseph was a child, he foresaw these things through his dreams of what he knew was to come. And what we're actually seeing is a combination of these dreams actually being realized now. They're feasible, tangible. You can actually see when you start to connect the puzzle pieces with this. And it starts off in the first part. It says, "Now the famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, 'Go back, buy us a little food.'" Now, one of the things that was interesting here when I first started off with the first part of this was that they only got enough food, even though Joseph knew that this particular famine was not a temporary thing, but it was a long term thing that was going to happen. And it was going to take them a while to get out of this. But he gave them just enough, almost like to bait them, because he knew that hunger, natural hunger, would cause them to have to seek him again. But yet he's sitting there and they're not understanding. They were happy when they left, but they didn't understand exactly the whole master plan of what was going on. Now, because they came and got grain in the first year of the famine. Now we know that the famine was going to last for multiple years. So at least 7 years this famine was supposed to last. So then it says when they ate up all the grain, well, if you only got enough grain when you get there, he didn't give them grain enough for 7 years. He only gave them enough to satisfy them for a short period. But then once they had consumed these things, he knew that there would have to be some type of return, because at that particular point, no one in the land had any type of food available. So everyone was going to Egypt to actually trade, to actually get food to eat. So he knew that they would actually return. Good evening, Pastor Sadie. So Jacob told them to go do something, um, and to go and actually get more food. Go back, buy us a little food. So he commanded his children, his sons, to go back into this land to redeem more food for them. Then it goes on and says, "But Judah spoke to him, saying, 'The man solely warned us, saying, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down.' For the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" Now, here we see that Judah is actually kind of taking on a leadership role. And he's telling his dad, "Look, we're willing to go back and get you food and do what you say do. But this man was serious about what he said. Do you realize who we were speaking to? This man of authority told us that if we did not come back with our brother, that he would not even show his face to us." So that was the one way of saying that he would not even show us any type of kindness. That even, like when you need to get to somebody of importance, he's like, "I'm not going to even know you if you don't do what I tell you to do." So Judah understood this, and he took the urgency that with explaining this to his father, to let him know this is not to play with. This is what this man said, and this is what we have to do if we want to go back there and be allowed to actually get food. And then it says, "And Israel said, Why did you deal so wrongly with me as to tell the man whether you still had another brother? He's like, why are you all letting him all in our business? Why, what was so necessary for you to start talking about all this stuff? But they said, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him, according to these words, could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother down? So here we have that the conversation that's going on between the father and son actually is saying, you're thinking that we're out here just uh, boasting and bragging about things, but this man asked us specific questions, and we didn't have time to make up stories. We answered it what he asked. Yes, we have a father. Yes, we have a brother. So there was no maliciousness in it. We were just going ahead answering a question in a conversation for a person that we should not have even had access to. So this is what he's explaining at this time. And then it says, the whole thing about the brother, what could we have known about all this? We don't understand why you're so upset about it, like we've done something, but all we did was just have conversation. Then it goes on to say, then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go that way, that way we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be a surety for him. For my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned this second time. So he's going further with the negotiation with his father, and he's like, look, Dad, he said, this is what the man has told us. So why don't you do this? You let me take Benjamin with us, because this is what the man asked for. This was the prerequisites for us to get back in front of him. So he wanted to see him. But let me tell you this, I will give myself as bond, as ransom for this. That if something was to go on and something was to happen, that I will give myself up. There'll be no harm, there'll be no loss that way. And you have to understand that. So see, here again, we see that Judah is offering his life as a guarantee for Benjamin. So here again, we see that he has taken on a whole different role when in comparison to what he did 20 years prior with Joseph. Now he's standing up for something. So it's really different, the contrast of where he is actually grown to at this particular point, whether it be the famine that drove him that way, or the point of them looking at that they're not able to feed their families, because you have to think these are older men now. They're not young men, they're older men. So they have responsibilities and families and all these other things like that. And you have to remember, they were not poor, but it was the famine that actually affected them, that nothing was growing there. So it was a mass call, or where it's kind of like a where you would have a collapse, a economy collapse, because only the people that had the goods were the ones that actually were wealthy. But you could have been wealthy, but you can't do anything with the assets that you have. So this is where they actually found themselves. And then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then go and do it. Take some of the best fruits of the lands into your vessels and carry down a present for the man, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrhs, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Now, see, this reinforces what we talk about, that there was substantial wealth where they were coming from, because you can look at the type of gifts that they were actually bringing forth to him as a gift to the man. Because at this point, we know that he has no knowledge of who this man is, nor do the brothers do, but they're bringing their prize gifts, because when you start talking about spices, spices were a wealth commodity. When you talk about pistachios and almonds and things like that, those were signs indicative of wealth, honey, these different things. Take double the money in your hand and take back in your hands the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. So we remember how Joseph had the money returned to them. They didn't understand why, but now he's going back to say, out of being righteous and without blame, this is what we want to make sure that we're going to give him the money that he put back in there, plus we're going to come with additional funds. We're not going like we're beggars or anything. We're upright people. This is where he's saying at this point. And then he says, take your brother also and arise and go back to the man, and may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So here he's asking them to go ahead with the plans that have been asked by Joseph. Now, he has no clue exactly what it is. He's just almost just accepting the fate right now, that when he says that if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. All before, he didn't want to do this because he said that if it happened, that his hair would grow long and gray, meaning that he would just almost just die in himself. Maybe not drop dead right there, but everything inside of him would die when it signified that he would have the gray hair. So then he goes on that he talks about, so then the men actually took that present and Benjamin, and they took double the money in their hand and arose and went down to Egypt. And they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, take these men to my home and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. Then the men did as Joseph ordered, and the men brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, it is because of the money. Now, they could not even wrap their heads around the type of kindness that was being shown to them. Now, think about the level of forgiveness that Joseph had to have in his heart as well, because he had every bit of the power to have them completely executed, to bring them all in one particular area and just annihilate the whole clan. But they could not understand this twist that was going on. They were like, we don't even know this man. He's asked all these questions about our family. Now he's asked us, told us that we had to have our brother here. And if we didn't, we couldn't get before him to get the food that we need. But now we're here and he's treating us like we're supposed to be here. He's saying, roll out the carpet for them, put them in my private space, not outside somewhere else, but put them in my private space, bring them to my home. But the thing about it was that they were afraid because they thought, okay, this is a great setup. He thinks we didn't stole the money, so now he's gonna get us all in the house and kill us all. So this is where they're thinking, their mind is. And it says, it is because of the money which was returned in our sacks first time that we are brought in, so that we make a case against us and fall upon us and take us as slaves with our donkeys. So here's where their mind is that we are being set up. If he don't kill us, it means that he's going to take over and we're going to have to stay here and serve him. This is where their minds are at this way. So they feared the kindness. You know, they were like, something not right with this. I don't even know dude like that. Why is he being so extra with us? Why is he going overboard to make us feel okay and treating us to this lavishness? So then we go on and it says, when they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house and said, oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. But it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks there, and each man's money was in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in your hands. Now, when they came and they had the money, they had 30 pieces of silver, which is very unique. That 30 pieces of silver that keeps showing up throughout the Bible and the significance of it. That it was the money of a sacrifice. That's how I kind of see it. That it was the sacrificial bait, that 30 pieces of silver. But they were saying that everything that was put in that bag, we brought it back. So we've not been dishonest. We have not tried to steal or anything like that. So we're showing you that we are honest and upright people because we're bringing this money back to you. And it says, we do not know who put our money in our sacks. But he said, peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers has given you treasures in your sack. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. So it's like all of these things, I wanted you all together. But see, they yet cannot realize the pieces to this puzzle yet. So he made sure that he aligned all these things and gave them prerequisites to do this and to do that in order for these things to be. And now, when he's gotten everything and he rewarded them and he gave him their brother back. So we start to see that this puzzle, how it's starting to come full circle about that these brothers have been restored. Those that were taken away, things that were precious that were taken away, have been restored at that point. And then when we actually go on to our next verse, it says, so the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet. Now, see, that is a luxury that actually happens with people that travel. You know, normal people that travel, ordinary people, but they were getting the royal treatment that was going on here. So it had to be a very um, comfortable but uncomfortable situation because they cannot realize, or they don't realize, why are we getting this type of treatment? We don't know this man. We don't know who this, because most of the time when you hear him talk, they talk about him, they're still talking about their servants of his. So they can't understand the graciousness that's actually being given to them. And they washed their feet and they gave their donkeys feed. They treated the animals well too. Then they made the presents ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the presents which were in their hands into the house and bowed down before him to the earth. So here we see that again, they're still reverencing Joseph as this leader, or this someone of great regard, you know, that because they says that when they bowed down meant that they got prostrate, their faces were on the ground, so they didn't even feel worthy enough to stand and look at him eye to eye, but they got on the ground and bowed before him. But here, once again, we see that in this particular act, they don't remember, but this is yet what Joseph had said in their dream, that yet they would bow before him. But they don't realize this, that they thought they were honoring this Egyptian official, but yet this had been foretold when he was a young boy, what was going to happen, that they would bow down before him. Then he asked them about their well being and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? And they answered, your servant, our father. Here again, there's no connection here. They don't know who anybody is because they're calling even their father his servant. Is in good health. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin and his mother's son and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now this heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. Now, the funny thing here is that Joseph has never lost his passion or love for his brothers, even though the things that they've done to him and mistreated him. But here, just to lay eyes on them, just overjoys his heart. He's just so happy to see all of his brothers. Now, you think the last time that he saw Benjamin was probably when Benjamin was a small child. So all he had was the memories of him as a babe. So this actually lets us know why it was so urgent for him to see him, because he had not seen him in all those years to know what he had grown up to be. Now he knew, we still have this same thing going on where Jacob favored, different children because of who their birth mothers were. But here was another one of the favored sons that was actually let go in order for the benefit of the family. So this was the unique part about it, because Joseph just couldn't take it. It was just so overwhelming. I don't know how you would feel that if you had been separated from someone you loved, and as you came back into the fold, you knew exactly who they were, but they did not know you. And then it kind of makes me think about the same thing like with Jesus, that he knows who we are, no matter where we are in life and how we separate ourselves and how we get away from him. But when we get back in the house, just how he just worships, and he just is overwhelmed by having you back in the house. That's why it's always so important to make sure that no matter how far that we get out or how far we see others get out, that we can exercise forgiveness and humility and servitude to do whatever it takes to get them back in the house. And it kind of reminded me of that comparison of how much and Jesus loves us, that no matter what, there's nothing that we can do, that he will not react that way to be so overwhelmed to get us back in the house. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, serve the bread. So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, where it was an abomination to the Egyptians. Now we start to talk about how this table was set. Even though Joseph was the one that was the Egyptian official, but because he was not Egyptian by birth, he could not sit with the other Egyptians that were in the room, because Egypt was one of those places that believed in segregation more than you could ever imagine. They were so strict on it that they did not even want any imports coming into Egypt from any outside places. That if any of like the artistry that came from different parts of the world, like the Greek artistry and things like that, they didn't even want that kind of stuff. It's like Herodias was like, no, 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 no. If it is not Egyptian made, it cannot be anywhere around here. So that particular um, frame of mind even happened at the table. There was separation, that here Joseph was higher than anybody that was in that room, but yet he could not sit with the Egyptians. And then because of his brothers being Hebrews, they were not allowed to mix. So they were separated at the same time too. So they're all eating of the same things, but they could not sit together because it was an abomination. So um, then they go on, and it says, and then when Joseph came home, they brought him the presents which were in their hands in the house, bow down. I lost my spot, y'all. Hold on. Let me find my verse. Okay. So about it being an abomination. I was in 32. 32 talked about the abomination of what was actually happening and why they had to eat by themselves because of the point of the separatists. And this was another thing that where we look at God's plan sometimes supersedes everything that we actually have, because we'll see as this story goes on how God's plan, where he warned way back in the beginning about the mixing, that they were supposed to stay away from the Canaanites, This is almost the same exact thing where we see that the separatism and why the separatism was so important because the Hebrews were raised under one specific ideology, and the Egyptians had their own, and the Canaanites had theirs. So when you take those type of mixings with different uh, races of people or creed of people, what you tend to do is diminish the belief of one because what happens is one absorbs into the other. Therefore, you lose the essence or purity of different things. We see this example a lot of times when people immigrate and they come from a different country, but they become so Americanized that they lose the essentials or the essence of their own background or their own previous homeland customs and things like that. And when the first generation they hold on to the second, they don't want to do it. By the time the third or the fourth, you get people that don't even understand what is it, what's the importance of it. So this is kind of how they thought about why they were such separatists. And they set down before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at each other. Then he took servants for them um, from before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any others. So they drank and they were merry. Now, the funny thing here was that they should have thought something was funny going on because he put them in kind of like chronological order. Okay, get the oldest to the youngest. And it's just like, why would you do this? I would still be suspect. It's like, okay, what you planning on knocking us all out, ping, 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 or using one against the other? You see what happens to the oldest one, and then you're next. But this is how they were actually sitting there. And then when he got to Benjamin, he gave them more than everyone else. Now, I don't know if they might have been thinking that he's trying us to see what we're going to say, or someone's going to question him about why did you give him more, or why did he deserve more, anything like that. But the motivation that he actually had, as we find out, is because Joseph knows that Benjamin is his blood, complete blood brother, and he's actually giving him gifts to actually see this favoritism again, him being that last child, that favorite child of his father, that he's giving him these things, but yet it doesn't arouse the brothers at all. So it lets you know that they've kind of gotten used to being not the favorite or not recipients of more, but they were okay with it. And it as well, it also shows a change of heart in the brothers too, that they didn't have any type of grievance against the younger brother like they had with Joseph, because he got more attention, more of these different things like that. So if we go into chapter 44, then it goes, and he commanded the steward of the house, saying, fill the men's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money. So he did according to these words that Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys. So the interesting part here is that we have another great setup going on. Now, I can imagine how they might have felt when we get to the revelation of this same thing happening again, but how Joseph basically planted these things back. Everything that they had given, he had given back to them and given them more, but they could not see the gifting because I guess it was kind of two edged the way it was. There was a gifting at one point, but there was a compelling to come back or a reason to have to come back because of what actually took place. And then the big important thing here was that here again, he put his silver cup. Now, this particular silver cup had a lot of relevance in what it was because it was the cup that Joseph actually would hold in his hand and actually kind of speak um, his wisdom or insight about these things, or actually interpretations that he had. So it was his cup that he considered his cup for divination. Now, the thing about the divination part, that it had not been condemned by God at this particular point. So if it had, I truly believe that Joseph wouldn't have done that, because Joseph did know God. God knew Joseph. So I don't think that he would have actually, did that. But anyway, so when they actually did all these things, they were on their way back to Canaan, just as happy and merry and all these different things. And then it says, when they had gone out of the city and they were not far away, Joseph said to his servant, "Get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not the one of from which my Lord drinks, with which he indeed practices divination? You have all done evil in doing so.'" So here's how Joseph is really setting the stage here for his servants that are not going to even question him. Like, dude, you told us to do this. Now you want to go out there and tell us, look, accuse them of doing some stuff to you. But because they were servants of his and he was an official, all they did was follow his orders. They didn't think about any of it. It was just a thoughtless thing. They just went ahead and did exactly what they were told to do. And here was the importance about the cup, was that the cup was a symbol that you could not say did not belong to him. That would signify the offense that actually was committed. So he overtook them and he spoke to them with these same words. And they said to him, "Why does my Lord say these things? For be it from us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we brought to you from the land of Canaan the money we found in the mouths of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from the Lord's house? With whoever of your servants it was found, let him die." So they're just adamant. They know, like, what's going on here? We already know we ain't did nothing like that. We were honest enough to bring your money back to you from the first time. And now here you come back here again talking about we did this and we did that. I don't understand. Why would you think we, your servants, would end up doing this? Do you think we're crazy? We want to die? It's like, if we did this, let me die. It's kind of like when you say, I lift my hand up to God. If I did, strike me dead. That kind of thing. That's the seriousness of how they actually felt about this. And he says, now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and ye shall be blameless. Okay, so he's saying, whoever has it, this is what the deal is going to be. This is what you're going to have to give up, is that if you are found with it, you will be my slave. Now, he had the right, because of his title, that he could have killed everybody and just said, if you find it on them, wipe them all out. See, Joseph still had the upper hand the whole entire time. And as we look at this story, we kind of wonder, is he going to do this? Is he going to take revenge? Is he going to do all these things? But as we start to find out later, as we start to come into the story, we see that God's plan always works out. We may not understand the details, but God knows the beginning, the middle, and the end. So we just have to flow with this a little bit. But very fascinating puzzle pieces that when you start to get attached emotionally with this story, because you're thinking like, Joseph, you wrong. Why you keep setting them up like that? They did everything. They gave you money. They didn't come at you wrong or anything like that. Yeah, what you asked of them, they did. But there's a rhyme and a reason for everything. Then each man speedily let down his sack on the ground and opened his sack. So he searched. He began with the oldest and left off to the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. Now, this was significant because they could have let Benjamin just go. They just like, dude, you stole this cup. We out here just swearing up and down that nobody would do anything like this. And now look how you brought shame onto us. And when remember that anytime that grief is actually shown about something, that they would rent or rip their clothes. So this is what in grief or disdain of what has been found, that they all ripped their clothes. But the interesting thing here was that they did not allow him to return by himself. It says, each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. Now, the uniqueness in that was that, as I told you before, these men were middle aged, older guys, and they had families and responsibilities, but they cared so much about not going back to tell their father that anything happened to Benjamin, because they promised they would take care of him, that they felt that the better deal was to all of them to serve in enslavement rather than to go back home and actually tell their father exactly what happened, because they were free to go. But here we see that there was a compassion change, as with Joseph, where they did what they did to him and then had no concern for him. But here with Benjamin, you see that there's a maturity that's actually happened at this point, that now they cared about their father, because with Joseph, they didn't. This is where we'll get to. Then it says that so Judah and his brothers came to the house of Joseph, and he was still there, and they fell down before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination?" He said, "Do you already know that I know what your mind and your intent is? What is going on with you? What is really going on with you, and how do you feel that you could actually do these things to me?" And then, so as they fell down on the ground, you already know that this is another sign of submission, the humility of them, that they're down like that, and that Joseph was trying to make the point that this is how I make my money, this is how I keep my job. How could you do this to me? But the part about it is that as a Hebrew, we knew already that Joseph served Yahweh, God. That's who he served. And that cup did not matter, because the insight and the wisdom that he got came from God. It did not come from a cup. Then Judah said, "What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak, or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servant. Here we are, my Lord's slave, both we and he also with whom the cup was found." But he said, "Far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for you, go up in peace to your father." Now, the interesting thing here is that Judah is actually having uh, some reflective time here. He's like, uh oh. He says, "Did you find God has found out the iniquity of your servant? God, you done found out my secret." It just lets us know that no matter what we do and what we try to hide, and how many years go, and how we paint it and dress it up and do all these things to it, that our sins cannot be forgiven except for the blood of Jesus. He thought that time would cover up the sin of what he had did to Joseph. But now he's feeling that guilt complex once again, that here is what's happening. It's come back to bite me. He's found out about this. So now he's telling them, "Okay, this is what you do. I have my slave. I have my," not knowing that he knows that's his little brother, but he's like, "I have my slave. Now you go on back and go up in peace to your father. Go along your way. I'm not holding anybody else accountable. You just go on your way." Then it says, "Then Judah came near to him and said, Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant. For you are even like Pharaoh." My Lord answered his servant, saying, "Have you a father or a brother?" And we said to my Lord, "We have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, who is young. His brother is dead, and he alone left of his mother's children, and his father loves him." Then you said to your servant, "Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him." And we said to my Lord, "The lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father will die." But you said to your servant, "Unless the youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. So here, what we have is probably the perfect uh, uh, defense case. This is the first attorney that jumped up. I mean, he's spitting stuff just like F. Lee Bailey or somebody. He's pointing out all the reasons why. These are the reason why all these things have happened. And he's asking, but take a time and listen to me, and don't let your anger burn that you can't hear what I'm saying to you. But he's making his case about the most passionate case to turn the reasoning why these things happen. All these things happen, my Lord, because of you. You were the one that asked all these things to come to place, that we couldn't do these things. And that we told you that if we could not, that the brother could not leave the father because he would die if anything actually went or happened to him. This was actually what you said. You told us to come back or we could not see your face. So it was when we went up to the servant, my father said, that we have told the words of my Lord. And our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down if the youngest brother is with us. Then he then we will, excuse me, then we will go down, for we may not see the son's face unless the youngest brother is with him. Then our servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me two sons, and the one went out from me. And I said, surely he is torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me, and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my gray hair with sorrow and to the grave. So here again, where um, Jacob is actually had told them these things, and Judah is recounting this conversation that went forth. That he told him that, I lost the one, and that almost killed me, and I have one left. And if anything was to befall him, I'm just gonna die. That's just it. I'm just gonna die because I believe that even though I hadn't seen the evidence, but yet I believe that Joseph was torn to pieces by an animal when they brought the cloak back with the blood on it. This is what I believe. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen when we see that the lad is not with us, that he will die. So your servant will bring down the gray hair of your servant, and your father will sorrow to the grave. For your servant became surety for the lad to my father. So I became uh, betrothed or bonded or given to my father. I gave my father my word, my life on this, that I was going to take care of Benjamin. And if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. He's saying that I will carry the guilt of that for the rest of my life. Then he goes on to say, now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with my brothers. For now I shall go up to my father. If the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father. So now we have that Judah actually is saying, take me, let me trade places with him, because this type of calamity is just going to destroy our family. Now, the funny thing about it is that um, even though now he's talking about the destruction that's going to actually come to his family because of this, but he never thought about that thing when he did these things to Joseph. So we see actually that there's a shifting that's happening in the lives of people. And that's the thing about it, is that sometimes when God is in control, even though we want to take vengeance in our own hand, Joseph had all the power. When he recognized them and they didn't recognize him, he could have snapped them out instantly. But God's plan is always bigger than our plan. And that sometimes, even though our personal emotions or egos get involved in it, we have to let God lead us. We have to step back and take that second seat sometimes. Even though our tongue may want to say something, our hands want to get busy, we have to give it over to Him. Let Him make the first steps. Then we go to 45. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept aloud. And the Egyptians of the house and Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. So he had to give up the plan at this point, because you remember that Joseph already saw these things and he knew these things. So God disclosed these things to him. And but now the revelation comes, because it was always interesting to me that even though they were in his presence and he was in all of this garb, that there was nothing that they could recognize about him. But now he could always recognize them. He knew them right off. There wasn't a thing about him like, "Oh, tell me who you belong to." There was none of that. He knew exactly who they were, and he was overwhelmed with joy and grief. And he wailed so loudly when they said he sent everybody away from him so he could have his moment. And he just let it all out. Can you imagine 20 years of holding something in, that now he actually gets to see every single body that he loved? It never said anywhere that he stopped loving his brothers. He just endured what was going on, but it never said he stopped loving them. And the master plan was actually to get them all back into his presence. But the funny thing was that when he disclosed himself to his brothers, it says that they did not even respond. They were in dismay. And when you really think about the word dismayed, um, it actually, from the Hebrew definition, it actually means to be amazed or frightened or terrorized or terrified. So can you imagine? They're like, "You who?" I know that they whole souls just jumped out of their body. They were like, "What? You're," and every last one of them had a presence of who Joseph, or a recognition who Joseph was, even down to Benjamin, that he knew that he had a big brother. There was someone else besides him that was no longer there. And now the final puzzle piece is being fit in. And what does he say? He asked about, he says, "How is my father?" He never stopped loving his father. He could have possibly gone back and all this other stuff, but he was on a mission. And sometimes we have to understand that we have to allow God to pull back the levels of an onion to get to the core, because there's a lot of things that cover up. But when he reveals, there's no doubt about what it really is. And this is exactly what's happening here. And these brothers, they were terrified because they knew what they had did, because Judah had actually acknowledged it before when he said that our secret had been actually found out. God has found our iniquity, is what he actually said. Then he goes on and says, "And Joseph said to his brother, 'Please come near to me.' So they came near. Then he said, 'I am your brother. I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold in Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves.'" So he's showing compassion and forgiveness here, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. There's a reason for all that I went through. And every time that we're struggling with things in life, we have to remember there is a reason why we go through these things. And we always talk about that our suffering are not is not for ourselves, but it's a testimony for someone else. That when you keep your hand in God's hand, that He has the master hand plan and He has it all worked out. Because we had a child that was sold, thrown in a ditch, sold into slavery, went through all of these things, learned and perfected his administrative skills, gone through to be learned to be a negotiator, learned how to be an accountant, learned how to be a strategist. He learned all these things through what we would have called suffrage, because there was a separation from this family. But because of God's plan, if it had not been, they would have diminished, because they bonded with the Canaanites, and that particular whole line would have been absorbed because they were lost all of who they were. But God kept it this way. God's plan is always greater than ours. Don't ever think that you can figure it out because you're not. It's not going to happen. So then it goes on to talk about later. I'm a little late now. I was enjoying this whole little lesson. But anyway, so as we go on, and it talks about Pharaoh and Joseph, because Pharaoh actually heard what was going on, and then he actually disclosed to Pharaoh who these people were. And Pharaoh was so overwhelmed because Pharaoh actually loved Joseph. And so what he did was that he actually told Joseph's brothers to actually come, and then he loaded them with animals and riches and golds and food and all these other things, and he told them to actually go back to where they came from their hometown. Take these carts and all these things. Now imagine when Pharaoh's giving you carts, it carries the emblem and the endorsement from the king. So this is what they did, and this was the equivalent of going over in some of our neighborhoods that are not as affluent or urban areas, and landing a jumbo jet in the middle of Crenshaw. Everybody's just like, what? You doing it like that now? Everybody's in amazement as to what's going on. So they're carrying all these emblems and they're carrying these signs of the king, of what he's actually done with them and how he's restored them. And then it says they gave them, and he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. So they sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. So he made sure that everything along the path would work out for their good. And in surmising the rest of it, we know that the story actually, Jacob gets to hear the good news of what has happened about the reconciliation with his children. He finds out that his son is yet alive. And we need to take this particular story to understand that no matter what we've done in life, that God and God alone is the only one that can abstain us through the blood of Jesus for all of our sins. That is why he died on the cross for us, and that he can restore you. Even when it looks like everybody's against you and you've been counted out, remember this, that God can count you in. And when he elevates you, there's no question about elevation, because there's nothing that can come against his will and his way. So I hope that you have enjoyed it. This story about how Joseph has revealed himself, the lessons of revelation is what it actually is. And be with us tomorrow at 6 o'clock for more of It's About Time. I hope you're excited about this as we go through the Bible chronologically, and we actually get the impact of the story. We get to feel it in time and space so that it all makes sense. So make sure that you're here. Also, if you have any questions about anything that has happened through the lesson, make sure you put them in the chat, and that we can actually go back and look at them and maybe address all those things for you or bring more clarity. Okay? But God bless. Thank you for your time so much, and have a blessed evening. Bye.